The Health Fix podcast teaches you how to take charge of your health naturally by giving you the information you need to elevate your health.
Hello there, health junkies. Welcome to another episode of The Health Fix. I'm your host, Dr. Janine Krause. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to eat to keep your gut healthy. I get this question all the time in my office, and there's a lot of folks out there that have different diets for different types of gut issues, but what if we just want to keep our gut healthy and prevent having issues down the road? Well, this podcast is for you because there's so much confusing information out there. I'm finding that patients are coming in and they're like, I'm going to eat a specific carbohydrates diet, or I'm eating a low sulfur diet, or I'm eating a low histamine diet, but we really don't know why they're doing that. It's kind of more of a because someone said that that would be a better option for you. But what if we went way back in time and we were like, what foods should you eat that are going to keep your gut healthy so that you don't have all of this plethora of gut issues? So back to basics here. And of course, my podcast lately has been all about back to basics. And this one is going to be all about how we're going to keep your gut healthy so that you're not ending up going down rabbit holes of trying to fix SIBO or trying to do this or trying to do that, because there's some foundational things that we can do to fix our gut so that we can think clearly. We can keep extra weight off. We can have all day energy. We can put the hormones in check. Keep that skin glowing too. That is a big deal. Your skin is a direct reflection of what's going on in your gut. Your skin's messed up. Your gut's got some issues. So let's get into talking about basics. Back to basics here. I'm not giving a diet plan. I'm talking about gut hygiene. I'm talking about what with foods jacks us up and what you want to be thinking about going forward to help yourself to keep your digestive system healthy. So here's something really, really kind of interesting that I found, that I've learned and really kind of had to test over the years. Let's put it this way. The Chinese medicine principles all talk about keeping your digestive system healthy for longevity. So Chinese medicine has been around for thousands of years. And that was a principle in my learning, in the books, in the readings about Chinese medicine. Keep your gut healthy, you will have longevity. So they knew it then. What did they know about it then? A lot. And a lot about digestive hygiene, or meal hygiene, if you will. And I'm not talking like they had purified water. That wasn't the case. I'm talking about the habits you have around eating. So let's talk a little bit about food habits. Because I'm sure that most of you, including myself, I'm going to call myself out on it. There are days when I will be standing at the kitchen sink eating. I will be driving and eating. I will be eating on the run at my office because I ran late with some patients and didn't give myself enough time to eat. In fact, if you've listened to previous podcasts of mine, you've heard me mention that I had to eat smoothies or drink smoothies for a while at work because I was busy and not able to sit down and actually eat a meal. This is a key component. Do you think my body really digested those nutrients that I was slurping down really quickly in a frenzy to try to get from one patient to the other? Heck no. No. It helped because it was already pre-digested by being blended. But it did not save the day for me. So I want you to be thinking today during the podcast about what you could do to improve your food hygiene. Just in general, your habits around eating. Because a lot of us really don't put that connection together. And it is at the foundation of why we get SIBO, so small intestine bowel overgrowth. It's at the foundation of why we have food sensitivities. It's at the foundation of why histamines are a problem. Because we have to go back to how we digested the food and what went down over years and years and years. I'm in my 40s right now, and so I've had 4 decades of beating up my gut. Think about what you've done. And I'm not trying to blame you or make you feel bad about yourself. This is just a real deal here. what has happened in your decades of life that you've beat up your gut. So let's talk about those food habits that cause trouble. So number one is eating fast. If you eat too fast, if you're chewing and like 2 bites and then you literally 2 chews and then you swallow, you're putting big molecules of food in your gut that your gut has to deal with. Over time, that's hard on the gut. The colder the food, the more the gut has to warm up its juices. It has to get things flowing a little bit more. Imagine if you put ice on your skin, what happens? It numbs your skin. So what do you think's happening in your gut? So a lot of us, and myself included, I have been totally guilty of this. I will go into a restaurant and they'll have ice water. I will sit there and drink that ice water before my food comes. I'm numbing my gut. So am I going to digest that meal well? No. And this is something that Chinese medicine talks about all the time, food temperatures. You know, if it's 105 degrees out and you drink cold water and you have a salad, it's probably not as bad because your body temperature is going to be warmer. But if it's 60, 50 degrees out and you chug a whole bunch of ice water before a meal and then you eat a big meal out, what do you think's going to happen? I don't know how many times I've been out to meals and I've done this repetitively and I know better. And then I'm freezing cold after the meal. I'm like shaking. Well, because I literally froze myself from the inside out. And do you think digestion's going to go well? Heck no. And I've self-reported on this podcast that I have probably inherited one of the worst digestive systems ever. And even myself with all of the education, I know better, but this happens. So these are some of the things we need to be thinking about because I have so many people that come into my office and they're like on a million different diet plans and wondering why it's not working, but the foundational stuff's not there. They're eating too fast. They're drinking cold foods. Or drinking cold, you can drink cold foods in a smoothie, but drinking cold water. So drinking cold food or water, meaning smoothie or water. These things are problems. It numbs your gut, but it also dilutes your enzymes that you need to break down food. The digestive system needs digestive fire. That's what your enzymes are. It's fuel to help you break down the food. And in Chinese medicine, we talk a lot about that. And this is a problem. And a lot of us are not paying attention to that because we're eating on the go, which is another issue. We all have time to slow down. All of us, every last one of us, have time to slow down. We just need to commit to doing that. We're sitting there going, oh, I don't have time. I have to hurry up. I'm going to shove this in really fast. And then we complain that we have gut issues and multiple food sensitivities. Let's think about this here. Where is it coming from? We are not committing to helping ourselves on the basic level. We're looking for supplements. We're looking for diets to help fix a problem. And then when we start doing all this and we don't get results, it's because we haven't went back to the basics. So if you haven't got that down by now, I don't know what to tell you. We got to work on the basics. So eating too fast is a big deal. Eating on the go causes us to eat fast and not pay attention. We're also sending our digestive system signals that there's a bear right after us. We need to be thinking like, okay, I'm going to eat. It's a parasympathetic activity to eat and digest your food. So you want to tell yourself that you're in parasympathetic mode. I'm chilling. Spend 60 seconds to 2 minutes, a minute to 2 minutes before you actually eat, sitting down, just chilling. If you have a religious practice, it's a great time to say a little prayer. If you're not religious, maybe just count to 60, count to 120. Just sit and breathe for a minute. I think this is a big thing. You know, we talk about breath work and trying to get fancy with box breathing or 5-count inhales and 7-count exhales. But if we can't just get ourselves to sit down and breathe in the first place, why do we complicate stuff? Keep it simple for yourself. So, take 1 to 2 minutes before eating to breathe. Stare at the wall. Chill. Do nothing. Doesn't even matter. Just chill. That way you're slowing down your system, telling it nothing's going to attack it, nothing's after it. We just need to breathe and get things ready to accept the food. Maybe tell the universe you're happy that you're eating produce from your garden. I don't know. But the idea here is just breathing, slowing down before you get the food. Because if the gut knows it's going to receive food versus like full on attack because you're just pounding down the food, now you've got an advantage to help your body to digest that food better. So big deal there. The next big thing, if we take our time to slow down and we're not eating mindlessly, we're not eating on the go, we're not eating too fast, we actually are not overloading the gut. Now, intermittent fasting is something that's like hugely popular right now. It's what the cavemen did. It's what the cave women did. But it's, seems novel, but really the thing is it stops us from overloading our gut. Eating too much for too long of a time period. Intermittent fasting works because it allows your system to catch up. It also allows you to not beat your gut up as much for the duration of time that you would normally eat. So by eating less time frame, your poor gut doesn't get beat up for so long. It seems kind of simple and almost like, okay. That's the secret to intermittent fasting, really, is it's getting you to not overload your gut. That's all it's about. Yes, there's different chemical processes and people have went through like ad nauseum as to all of the different functions that happen in your body, but really, let's not complicate it. You're simplifying what's happening in your gut, which is where you're going to get results. So, don't overload the gut. Now, this is a tough one for a lot of people because one of the other big things I hear in my office quite often is, Doc, I don't know what a normal portion is. And the portions I see that I've been told that are normal portions feel really small to me. Yeah, that's possible. Because if you've been overloading and overeating for so long, a small portion might even almost feel scary, like, oh my God, I'm starving myself. I've felt that way. I've had that happen over time. I've really had to work on myself in portions. Because if you listen to my podcast 2 podcasts ago with Trisha Nelson, so episode 236, I talked about what happens, and she and I both talk about what happens when you are an overeater. It's an issue. It's a thing. And it's something to pay attention to and work slowly with yourself about your emotions connected to your food, but also working with trying not to overload your gut in any given sequence. Because what happens when you overload your gut is that your gut, your digestive system, basically your gut, cannot handle all of that food coming in at once. So molecules do not get broken down effectively. Then they sit on the gut lining. And so what happens is those probiotics, your beneficial bacteria, if you have them in abundance, they have to feed on it to help break it down even more. And what happens when you give big chunks of food to the body? You get weeds. Like those dandelions in your yard, you get yeast overgrowth. You get non-beneficial bacteria overgrowing because those guys are the strong ones that can handle breaking down these bigger chunks. They're just stronger, which is a bummer. Lactobacillus, our most beneficial bacteria, is often depleted in folks who overload their gut because lactobacillus is a fragile bacteria. It's like really, really fragile. I'm trying to think of something that's fragile. You know what? Basil. It's hard to grow basil. Let's put that there. It's like your basil in your gut. It's fragile. And so if you overload, you're not going to get lactobacillus growing to the amount that you want it, even if you take supplements. I see this all the time in gut results. And this is a problem because lactobacillus is what we need for a lot of crucial functioning of digestion, brain connection, hormone stuff, lots of things. So thinking about pausing before you eat and looking really truly at how much you eat in one sitting, not going back for seconds, not going back for thirds. Trying to stop yourself before you feel full to the gills. I know this is hard for a lot of people, and it was hard for me too, because I was so used to stuffing down my emotions that I would often, 2-3 portions of things. and you don't feel good when you do that. We all know that. But what we don't often connect is the overstuffing ourselves and all the gut issues down the line. It's like there's some weird separate disconnect between that. I don't know why. It's like we want to go to, I have a yeast problem, I have a SIBO, so small intestine bowel overgrowth problem, I have a this problem. But maybe you just have an overeating problem, and we need to look at portions. Now, a lot of people are going to ask and maybe be thinking right now, like, okay, what's a normal portion? I'll break it down for you based on the best portion control program I like. It's Precision Nutrition, and it's really using your body parts. Like your fist size of protein, or even palm size is what a lot of people have heard of, but it's a fist size. Same thing with fist size of a carb, whether it's a potato, whether it is grains, fist size. If you eat 2 fist size of quinoa, you're going to have gut issues. It's hard to break down that much for us. So thinking about portions, thumb size of the top of the like thumbnail of a fat in a meal when you're cooking with things. That's the oil size. Now, also, if we're looking at veggies, open palms, 2 of them. Yeah, it's a lot of veggies. And veggies, by the way, a lot of people will be like, oh, I really struggle with veggies. I think I have a gut issue where I can't break down veggies. No, they're hard to break down. And when they're raw, they're harder to break down because they're cold. Sauteed, blanched, steamed veggies are easier for us to digest because the cells have been broken apart a little bit by the process of cooking. If you struggle with gut issues, you want to be cooking your food. Raw food is hard. Yes, I know there's a lot of raw food movement folks out there. I hope they all live in really warm, tropical, close to the equator places because you need that warmth from the exterior to warm the interior. But this is something to really think about. So with your food, and like I was saying, open palms like this with your veggies, this is a good amount of veggies per meal. Now, that open palm, that's a lot, right? Like a lot of people are going to look at that and be like, oh my God. But if you cook it down, so this is the raw portion, cook it down, it like becomes so much smaller. You can get a lot of veggies in when you cook them. So point being here is help your gut out. It wants your help. Pre-digest stuff a little bit for it. You know, like baby birds get pre-digested food from their moms. Sounds gross, but it's to protect their gut. It's to help them out to get the nutrients they need. Help yourself out and cook your veggies. Now, those of you who are like, oh my God, I don't know how to do that. You know, it's not that hard. It takes like 5 minutes to put a little oil, some onions, garlic, and whatever veggie. You can make the most simplest but tastiest thing right there. Boom, sauteed veggies. Or get out a sheet pan and roast a whole bunch of them. Do it ahead of time. I do it with cabbage. I do a stir fry literally on a sheet pan. Cabbage, onions, cauliflower, carrots, peppers. If I'm feeling frisky, and then I put some ginger on there, boom, all on the sheet pan. Toss it up with a little oil, put on a little bit of coconut aminos, a little bit of sriracha, boom, you got your stir fry right there on a sheet pan. And you can do this so ahead of time, and now you've got it for a couple days. Now here's the caveat. Histamines. This is the issue. And it does happen when we leave things in the fridge for too long. There's also high histamine foods. And for a lot of us, we make a lot of food and then we intend to eat a lot of that food, which can cause issues in the gut. But if you freeze the food after you make it, now you can stop that histamine production as the food ages. Aged food, vinegars, cheeses, wine, beer, all these things have high histamines. So if you're struggling with skin issues in particular, rashes, hives, and you're not sure like what is the source of it, you've went down the idea of food allergies and nothing's coming up really conclusive, or you'll take a food allergy test or a gut test and it's all over the place depending on what, how long in between you took the test. Nothing makes sense. It's no rhyme or reason. You want to be thinking about histamines in your foods. Leftovers are not for you. Or if you have leftovers, you freeze them. So make your meal, you eat it, boom, everything else goes in the freezer. Or you meal prep, you have what you're going to eat for that next day, and everything else goes in the freezer. Now you might be thinking, I don't want to warm up my food all the time. You know what? You got to put the effort in. You want to be healthy. You want your digestive system to work properly. Get over your excuses and start taking care of yourself. I know this sounds nuts, but you have to put effort in and stop waiting for a magic pill. You do. If you want to be healthy, you got to do some effort. And there's ways to hack it, right? There's ways to make it easier for yourself. Having a meal prep day and then everything's there. Now, a lot of people are probably thinking right now, like, okay, what about warming up the food? What if I don't want to use a microwave to warm up the food? You don't have to. You can store things in jars, and I actually will often put my jars into hot water to defrost things if I need to in that case. There are ways around it. This podcast isn't about all that, but there are ways around it. Now, we've talked about the different habits around food. The other big thing about food is that it does go a long way to eat closest to nature and eat simply. Why do you think the Whole30 diet works? It's because it's eating closest to nature. There's no magic to it. It's just getting us back to not eating processed crap. If you have gut issues, you want to look at how much processed food you're eating. Anything that's coming in a bag, a box, and it has more than the original ingredient. Because we have a lot of issues with oils in particular. And this will be something that I'll hear a lot from patients will be like, yeah, doc, I went and got those organic, tortilla chips compared to my other tortilla chips I was eating, and I still feel the same. Yep. Because those organic chips, instead of using regular sunflower oil or canola oil or safflower oil, now they have expeller pressed organic. What do you think happens to those oils when you fry those chips? They become a chemical. And they become inflammatory. So if you're eating plantain chips, you're eating, tortilla chips, you're eating these things, and you're like, hey, it's organic, it's better. Yeah, I guess. But you're still getting chemicals because those organic oils switch to a chemical. And this is a problem because it's inflammatory. Those oils, sunflower, safflower, all those, when heated to a high amount in a frying situation, they turn into, it's basically like inflammatory oil now. It's gone from being beneficial to inflammatory. It's an omega-6 inflammatory oil. Because naturally, sunflower seeds aren't bad. As long as you don't roast them, they're sprouted, good stuff. But once that oil gets extracted and then converted with high heat, we've now created a problem. So don't fool yourself that these foods are healthy. Now, am I saying never eat them? I mean, sometimes you want a snack. Like, I will do that sometimes. But you have to know that if you're going to do that, be good about your food hygiene. Slow down. Don't wolf down that bag. Slow down. Eat those chips with something that's easier to digest. Maybe you have soup. Maybe you have a stir fry, something that's been cooked a little bit. I know a lot of people are going to be like, I usually do chips and salsa. Okay, let's break down chips and salsa for a minute. Salsa is cold. You can leave it on the counter, and it's sometimes if you get one that's warmer, now you've got a little bit of spices, meaning warmer, you've got some jalapeno in there. You can break that down a little bit better because you've got some spices in there to help with the digestive fire. But keeping in mind that peppers and tomatoes are high in histamine. So now what you're doing is you're compounding, you're eating high histamine foods with rancid oils, inflammatory oils. So it's possible you're going to get a reaction. What's the alternative here? If you really like tortilla chips, getting the tortillas, cutting them, baking them in the oven without the oil. Now you have less of an issue. Now, those of you who are purists out there are going to be like, well, what about all the pesticides and things in the flour if you do flour tortillas and all of that? And they're still processed. That's true. Yes, get organic if you can. Make your own if you can. Now, it boils down to thinking of benefit-risk ratio here. If you're going to have chips and snacks, you want to be in a chill state and not overload the gut, going back to the basics. So things to be thinking about. Another big issue that happens to a lot of us is the legumes, the beans thing, and the grains thing. Are beans or grains that detrimental to our health? It's all about portion, and it's how you cook them. Dr. Gundry is on it. I mean, he's right. The lectins are an issue because the lectins are proteins that protect these grains from being consumed. And then we try to pound them down in copious amounts. Of course, we're going to have irritation from grains. Yes, there's more pesticides put on these particular items too. So of course, getting organic's one thing. Buying them sprouted is going to help you to digest them. Sprouting anything improves digestibility. Putting these in a pressure cooker, so grains or legumes in a pressure cooker to cook them, is also going to reduce the amount of lectins and make it more digestible. The other thing that makes grains and beans more digestible is watching portion. Remember when I was going back to that fist? You don't want to be going over a fist size of rice or quinoa or whatever grain or legume you're using. And for a lot of people, a fistful is a lot, and that might even overload the gut. So what I'm recommending here is if you do like your beans, you like your grains, first start to figure out how much of the sprouted ones that you do okay with. Start with 2 tablespoons in a meal. So make up some sauteed greens, put a little meat or fish on the side, and then do 2 tablespoons of a sprouted grain. See how you tolerate it. Freeze the rest, lower the histamines. Go from there. Next day, try 4 tablespoons or 3 tablespoons. Now, it sounds nuts, but it will help you to figure out where is your sweet spot. How much can you eat of these? Most people will end up doing 2 to 3 fists of rice in an average sitting. It's too much for your body to tolerate. So things to be thinking about over time with your digestion. How you cook the food to make it more digestible. So pressure cooking the grains or legumes or buying them sprouted or sprout them yourself. There's tons of videos online to do that. And then portion. Huge. Now, if you want to go another step, there are supplements that have things like citrus pectin and kelp and glycine in them to help you to get the chemicals out of the body from eating things of this nature. I actually recommend doing supplements of that nature regularly if you do eat foods that are non-organic. Things to think about. Now, another thing that's been going on, and I've been hearing from patients, is what's going on with fruits. Do we eat fruits? Do we not? It's all about how many. If you're eating 3-5 portions of fruits a day, it might be a little too much. There is such a thing as a fructose sensitivity. That's fruit sugar. And is fruit sugar going to make you fat? Are fruits going to make you fat? No. It's the processed food and how fast you eat and your food hygiene that causes weight issues. Because you beat up your digestive system, then fruit becomes a problem. You can't break it down. Now, of course, histamines are an issue, and there's things like bananas and strawberries that have high amounts of histamines. Papaya, pineapple. There's different categories of high histamines and histamine releasing or histamine producing foods. I'm not going to get into the whole thing on that. That's a whole podcast itself. But the thing about fruit is watching portions, eating it at room temperature, and taking the time to eat it. Don't go crazy fast. Now, there's food combining and all of that as well. But really, the biggest issue that becomes a problem with food, the fruit and yeast and things of that nature is overloading on it. Too much. And how do we get the yeast in the first place? Likely we overloaded our gut. We ate too fast. Possibly didn't warm up our foods enough. Things of that nature. Go back to basics when you start thinking about these things. Now, dried fruit I'm always asked about. Is it good? Is it bad? If it doesn't have sugar, if it doesn't have sulfur, is it really that bad? How much dried fruit can you eat compared to a regular piece of fruit? If you're like me, I can pound down a lot of dried fruit. You can quote that one. That's a funny statement I made. But you can. I can eat a ton of dried mango compared to one mango. Think about it. I really do think that dried fruit is like candy. It's kind of junk food, and it has a potential for a lot more mold to grow on it and a lot more histamines. You got to be thinking about that. If you have gut issues, dried fruit is probably not your best option for fruit. It just really isn't. I would be grabbing an apple or some berries over playing with the dried fruit if you've gut issues. Just think about it that way, because it has the potential to grow a lot of mold, and it is high histamine. And histamines, by the way, if you're a newbie to histamines are your body's warning sign that something's wrong. So if you are eating something consistently that is high histamine, chances are you're going to be sending signals to your gut all the time that something's wrong. So you want to be varying your food. I will put in my chart, not my chart notes. That's a whole nother aspect of my job. I will put in my show notes at drjkrausend.com the best list on high histamine foods. There's a comprehensive one that's a Swiss list, and you want to see that. It's great and gives you a whole bunch of insight as to, are you eating like a meal full of high histamine foods? So for example, I always use this as like the hallmark of, this is where stuff can go wrong with your gut. You go to a dinner party back when we were allowed to have those kind of things. That would be like, you start off with your glass of wine, and then you go over to the table and there's nuts and there's cheese and there's fruit and there's olives, maybe, all high histamine things. So strawberries, chocolate covered strawberries, think about what would be out on a typical like smorgasbord of sorts at a wine and cheese party. All of that stuff, high histamine. So it's like a bomb to your gut if you're thinking histamines. And like I said, if you want to know where you're at on the histamine list, go to my podcast notes for this episode at drjkrausend.com, and I'll have a link to the Swiss list of high histamine foods. Now, another big issue that a lot of us struggle with is too many carbs, and starchy carbs in particular. Squashes, potatoes, sweet potatoes. How much should we really eat? Fist size. That's one portion. If you're doing more than that, you're overloading your gut with too many carbs in one sitting. And we could have some issues with that because, let's face it, if you have already gut issues, you might have too much yeast, you get those carbs in, those guys are going to bloat you. Or they're going to brain fog you because your gut's going to try to be figuring this out, which is another common symptom that your gut is overloaded, brain fog. Huge, huge issue. So what do we do about these carbs, and how do we figure it out? Portion. Get back to looking at your portions. Same thing with squash. There's nothing wrong with these guys. I mean, yes, potatoes might be nightshades, or might be, they are nightshades, but is it really the potato, or is it that you're eating too many of the potatoes? You got to think about this and really do some research on yourself. And I encourage journaling around food for at least a month of exploring what works, what doesn't for you. See if you can figure out a pattern. Nuts and seeds are much like grains. They're better sprouted, and they're better when they're blended. So nut butters are easier to digest than actual nuts and seeds. I recommend raw sprouted nuts or seeds as a good fat. And a quarter cup is the portion in one sitting if you're going to be eating nuts or seeds. Not a half cup, not a whole cup. And certainly not the big bucket of them that you would get in terms of big box stores that have memberships. That is an issue. Those roasted nuts, back to the chip situation. High heat oils cause trouble. High heat oils with your nuts, not going to help your gut. Not going to help your body either. Harder to digest. So really thinking about where you're at on that level. Really putting that into perspective. I've also seen a lot of issues with folks and oil in general and how they cook with it. Olive oil is not meant to go above medium heat. And I actually like to keep it on medium low. Just to ensure that I'm not causing trouble. Because the more rancid you make these oils by heating them up too high, the more they can have an effect on your gut. So looking at temperature. I like avocado oil for high heat. I like olive oil for low medium heat. I will sometimes use coconut oil, not as much because I found that it affects my cholesterol, but I will use that on the higher heat stir fry sometimes if I'm looking for that. Sesame oil also. But you want to be looking at your oils. Read the label. The cheaper the oil, the more refined it is. Spend money on your oils. Refined oils are oils that have been processed. Refined. Refined means it's going to be hard on your gut to break down in your body. It's going to be difficult. Expeller pressed oils are the way to go, and thinking about all of these different fancy oils like pistachio oil and walnut oil, don't heat them. Use them for salad dressings. And watch the portion. I have a lot of people that eat lettuce with their salad dressing. Too much oil in a meal is going to affect your gut. Like I said, thumb size, small amount of oil is what we need per salad dressing meal. Don't drench your stuff. And once again, yes, it's a salad, it's raw foods. If you put too much oil on it or too much salad dressing that's processed, what do you think's happening in your gut? You have a cold food that you just drenched in something that's really hard for your gut to break down. Of course you're going to have gut issues. I do recommend making your own salad dressings, and I will make a note at drjkraussnd.com as to my favorite book for salad dressings. It's called Modern Sauces. So I will put that in there as well. But there's a lot of stuff to be thinking about when you think about the gut. It's a complex process that I think we take for granted. We truly do. Now, one of my biggest platforms of discussion, let's put it this way, is all of the vegan cheeses and butters and things out there. I've tried them all. I have a lactose issue. And I wanted to see what would happen with my gut. And I also wanted to see what would happen with my body if I stopped eating butter altogether and I stopped eating the harder cheeses that I could digest, or the goat and sheep cheeses, and I tried some of these vegan cheeses. Some interesting things went down, and I think this is something for a lot of people to really hear, because there's the movement towards going vegan, and I'm all for it, but I'm all for making your own butters and cheeses and products versus buying what's on the market, because what's on the market has oils in it that are back to chips and things of that nature, not great for you, and can cause some serious inflammation in your gut and your body. So let's talk about my experiments with vegan butters and cheeses. I grew up next to Wisconsin, literally 2 blocks from the state. I love cheese. When I found out I was lactose intolerant, it was like a sad day in my world. But it also helped me to figure out what was going on with my gut. Now, there are a lot of fundamental problems with dairy in terms of how it breaks down in our body and the struggles that we do have with it. In Chinese medicine and in Asian cultures in general, you notice that there's not a lot of dairy. And it's because it's a cold, mucus-producing product. Now, maybe you might not have tied the mucus-producing component into it, but if you've ever had a cold or allergies and you had more dairy, sometimes you get a little more stuffed up. This might not happen to all of you, but on the average, it does tend to happen. And, it's a bummer. But with dairy has hormones in it because it is coming naturally from an animal. And while the hormones are not injected anymore, it still does have some natural hormone activity. And so there is more acne with dairy products. There are issues in terms of messing with hormone balance, especially if a lady is struggling with too much estrogen. Now, the other big thing about dairy is that it's cold. And when it gets in the gut, it's hard for the body, once again, just like any foods, just like cold water, things of that nature, it's hard for the body to warm back up, especially if you're in a cold environment or a damp environment, such as the Pacific Northwest. It's cold and wet here a lot of the time. So if you're eating a food that matches the environment, you're going to have more digestive fire, some more enzymes, more warmth to break it down. So, point being here is dairy is tough. And while I look at it in terms of simplicity, so goat cheese, sheep cheese, or I look at in terms of butter, which butter actually is quite digestible, even for folks with lactose issues. The other thing about butter, it is that it's high in something called butyrate. Butyrate is useful for the gut lining. It actually helps protect the gut lining. So what I'm saying here is that clarified butter or ghee or regular butter, good stuff, actually. Yes, there's cholesterol issues. Don't eat a stick of butter. 1 tablespoon of butter is not going to cause you to have to be on a statin medication. How do we counter this? You have to eat your veggies. Most of us are thinking like, I'm going to avoid this thing because it's been touted as being bad and having too much cholesterol. But we're not thinking about the big picture here. Don't eat more than a tablespoon of butter per meal. In fact, I actually recommend eating a little less depending on where things are at with your metabolic processes. And if you have gut issues, a little less butter might be useful. But I honestly, out of all of this, butter has more benefit for your gut lining because of its butyrate containing properties. It has short chain fatty acids that are good for your gut. A lot of these vegan butters and cheeses do not. And my concern with the vegan butters and cheeses is that there's a lot of different oils in these depending on which brand you get. Some brands have soy, some brands have canola, some brands have sunflower oil. And while it says organic, you still have to process that oil to make a cheese thing, to make it look like cheese shreds. That processing makes those darn things refined. So those whipped butters, like Earth Balance and different things of that nature, aren't as good as we originally thought because we have now taken oils and whipped them up, created an emulsified process that refines them. Butter has short chain fatty acids and butyrate. Sunflower seed oil does not have that component. So it's more beneficial. If you are someone who's eating the vegan, buying the vegan butters and cheeses, and you're just doing it because you're wanting to do it for a healthy change, you're not getting what you think. You're getting processed junk. So I spent some time eating these just to see if it would help me in terms of giving me that cheese factor that I like and giving me, that supplementation of that flavor. They don't taste the same. They don't melt the same, despite the claims. And the butters don't taste they taste different, depending on whatever nuts in them or whatever oil or whatever milk. So like the ones that taste like oat milk, tastes like oat milk. So the thing here is, are vegan butters and cheeses actually healthy for you? No. Are they the end of the world? No, but they're just like chips. They have processed oils in them that could be inflammatory. And in the time that I was eating a lot of these products, I did feel puffier. I did feel like my gut was struggling a little bit more. So my stance on this is that I'm going to recommend going back to the basics again here. If you like dairy and you have a lactose issue, you really want to limit it, but you want to be thinking about using things that have less lactose. The higher the fat the cheese, the harder the cheese, like Romano, Pecorino, those kind of things are going to have Parmesan. Those are going to have less lactose in them. So thinking about cheese in that way. And using it as a condiment, not the main event. Yes, not the main event. For us folks that grew up next to Wisconsin or are from Wisconsin, cheese sometimes is its own thing, right? You just eat it on its own. Cheese curds, for example. Yeah. You want it to be the additive. Sprinkling a little Parmesan on something, not the end of the world. And I'm not talking about the Parmesan that comes in the canisters. In our house, we call that stinky feet because that's what it smells like. But what I'm talking about is the stuff that is like the real on the block, shave the Parmesan. A little bit. Fine. Not the end of the world. Not going to mess with your hormones if you're doing like a tablespoon or two. Just don't eat the whole block of cheese. It's going to help your gut. Thinking about it in that perspective, harder cheeses can help you if you have lactose intolerance. If you have a true dairy allergy, then obviously you might have to go towards these vegan butters and cheeses and see how you do. I have found that a lot of people with dairy allergies don't struggle with butter if they keep the butter amount in check. So these are things to be thinking about overall. Because these vegan butters and cheeses, while yes, they're helping the environment and all of those things, I don't know if environment's the way to put it because they're in plastic most of the time and they are packaged. Whatever your stance is on animals, let's put it this way. Let me change my statement. If you're looking at what's important to you? What's more important to you in terms of your gut health? You want to be able to live a long, healthy life? Don't overload on these processed butters and cheeses. That's my point here. They are not healthier than actually doing butter, clarified butter, or harder cheeses if you have issues with digestion. And honestly, the bottom line here, and what I found with my gut, what I found with patients' guts, is using cheese as a condiment, not a main event. Small amounts, tablespoons, 1 or 2, boom, done. Not as much of an issue. And making sure that the cheese is going with warm foods. Cheese on a salad in the middle of December, not so great. Goat cheese on a salad in July, gonna digest it better. So thinking about the timing. Is it a warm day out? Is it a cold day out? Maybe don't use it. It's gonna overload you. Then going back to the basics like I mentioned before. Taking the time to eat. Slow down. Make food an experience, not a freaking wolf down timed event. I like to think of it, food is not like CrossFit. You don't have to beat everyone else. You don't have to go fast. Take your time and not heavy weight it in terms of how much food. You all out there right now who are struggling with gut issues might be thinking, I don't eat that much. I would look at what you eat in perspective to what you could do with changing portions a little bit. And if you do eat less than the portions that I mentioned, okay, maybe your body needs to have a little less and spread it out. Intermittent fasting, like I said, can be extremely beneficial for a lot of people. I always on the baseline of 12 hours. On the regular, like baseline 12, I will never eat less than 12-hour window. Unless like something seriously happens with travel and I'm all messed up. But that's usually my baseline. I like to, on average, go to about 14 to 16 hours between dinner and breakfast on the regular. And I find that helps keep my gut in check. I'm not as bloated. I'm not having as many gut issues. And I do think that intermittent fasting can be extremely beneficial for those of you who are struggling with the foundational issues of overloading your gut. The more that you can practice intermittent fasting, the better it can be for you to not overload your gut. You're kind of training yourself to not overload the gut. The caveat here is that when you do open your eating window, you have to watch that ravenous monster inside of you and put it in check. Because some people's heads will jack with them and say, oh, I fasted for this many hours. I can eat whatever I want. No, not the case. Got to keep it in check. So intermittent fasting, I give it a big old thumbs up. I also think that it is extremely beneficial for helping with metabolic issues. It does help with weight over time. It's not magical. Like if you start intermittent fasting for a month, you're not going to drop 80 pounds. I mean, it's going to slow happen over time. But what's the foundation of intermittent fasting? Not overloading your gut with food. You're giving your mitochondria, all the little factories in your cells that help to make energy, you're giving them time to take the food and process it out. Your body just needs time. You need to slow the process down and put the window of eating in a smaller little package. Let's put it that way. Now, a lot of people ask me, do I recommend eating, doing 24-hour, 36-hour fasts? Yeah, I will, especially myself. I have done them. I do 36-hour fasts quite often. I would say right now I've done it kind of quarterly. I think it's a nice rest for the gut. I do recommend when you reintroduce food after a 36-hour fast, you go really slow. Otherwise, you do have the potential for having gut issues like diarrhea right away, which is a huge sign. Don't overload your gut. So if you take nothing away from this podcast today, I want to leave you with this. Why do we have so many gut issues in the US? Why do folks make millions of dollars online for specific diets? It's because the habits caused the issues with the foods. You don't want to overload the gut. I've said that a million times. You want to slow down and actually chew your food. 20, 25 chews per bite. Slow the roll. You want to sit down to eat. You want to pause before you eat by a minute or two just to let your body, you're going into parasympathetic mode. More time before the meal to chill, better. I like waiting for food at restaurants now because I used to be like, oh my God, I'm so hungry. It's good that wait time's good. Just don't overload yourself with all the ice water that they put on the table. Sip on the water. Get some tea. Even better. Priming the digestive system with warm fluids. So key. Asian restaurants, small little cups. Why is that? So you can't overload with liquids and you don't dilute all your enzymes when you're digesting. There's a lot we can learn from Asian medicine in terms of digestion, or Asian culture in particular. Using ginger quite a bit. Warms digestion. Ginger tea with a meal warms digestion. Green tea, whatever it may be. So thinking about your food hygiene a lot will go a long way to helping your gut. Free stuff, not supplements, basics here. Then the next step is looking at how many processed foods and chemicals and things of that nature are going into your food. If you're eating even organic processed chips, you're still putting junk into your body. Even though it's organic, even though it's natural, it's still hard on the gut. So eating closest to nature is always going to get you the best bang for your buck. Same thing goes for all the vegan cheeses and butters. It's processed. If you make stuff yourself, like cashew butter at home, or you make the cashew sour cream and things of that nature, it tastes way better than what's in the store anyway. And now you haven't added a bunch of oils and made it rancid. So these are the things to be thinking about. You want to go vegan, you want vegan cheese, make it yourself. You want vegan butter, make it yourself. It's going to go a heck of a long way compared to what's in the store. Absolutely. Why? Because you're not putting those oils in there. Same thing goes with all of these chips. You can make chips at home. You don't have to fry things. You can bake them in the oven, or if you have a dehydrator, boom, there you go. These can help you to get that crunch that you want without having all the rancid oils. I will put some resources for you guys in my podcast notes at drjkrausend.com so that you can look at all of these different options I've presented to you to help to get your gut on point. But if nothing else, think about food hygiene first and go back to the basics, then move forward from there. Because sadly, for a lot of us, if we haven't paid attention to the basics, now we've got hormone imbalances, we've got all kinds of other things happening with the gut that cause trouble. So, folks, that's going to do it for me today. I hope that you've learned a thing or two. Like I said, head over to my notes. That'll give you a little bit more there at drjkrausend.com. And if you want to know more about the conversation around these topics, join the Facebook group, The Health Fix, and find your health fix, excuse me there. And we've got more information going on in there. We're talking about all kinds of things. And we're starting a challenge with the Eat Smarter book coming up soon on June 1st. So if you are up for working on eating smarter, join us and join the Facebook group. All right, everybody. Have a great day, whatever you're doing. Hey, health junkies. I hope you enjoyed my podcast. If you want to continue the conversation based on what topic I'm talking about at any given time on the Health Fix podcast, head over to my Facebook group, Find Your Health Fix. It's where we are talking about what's going on in health, what I'm talking about in the podcast, and I love to answer questions there. So come hang out and join the conversation. And by the way, right now I have a free Manage Your Stress Naturally course that you can grab on my website at drjkrausend.com, because so many people are stressed out right now, and really it has to do with the basics, your routines and simple habits that are messing you up. So head on over to drjkrausend.com and go check out my free course on managing stress naturally. All right, folks, have a great day, whatever you're doing.
Subscribe, rate, and share info.